Perfect. So just to start off, so for today, and this is the Nimbus case study video call that we have with Ronan O'Boyle, who's co-founder and director of Fixie 3D. So my own name is Laura Blake, and I'm part of the marketing and communications team here today.
And I'm Emily Stickland. I'm the other part of the marketing and communications side for Nimbus.
Morning, I'm Kevin O'Mahony. So I'm a research fellow working in Nimbus for the past 10 years. So like yourselves, I work in the technology gateway. A lot of my work is focused on user experience research and design services, and I work with Denise.
And I'm Denise, and like Kevin said, I'm one of the UX researchers here in Nimbus. I work a lot with Kevin and really focusing on like UX research, UX design, and a little bit of UI design every now and again.
Great. And I'm Ronan O'Boyle. I'm the co-founder of Fixie 3D. We are automating the architectural 3D printing process, and we've been working with Nimbus on wireframe prototyping and user journey mapping.
Perfect, brilliant. Thanks for all the introductions. Just to start off, Ronan, I suppose we'll start with yourself. If you can just give us a bit more detail on Fixie 3D and the services that you offer.
Yes, so currently we exist as a 3D printing company. So that's taking architects' 3D digital designs and making them into physical models through 3D printing. But we're moving forward, we're automating a lot of those processes. So the main idea revolves around a model customizer that would be based in a browser environment that the architect could, through a few tweaks, customize their model for 3D printing. The main obstacle in our industry at the moment is around file conversion from the architect's file into a 3D printable file, and we are working on automating that. So at the end of the process, the architect could either download the file to 3D print on their own printers or send to a supplier like ourselves.
Okay, wow, very good. It's interesting actually that there's that issue between the architects and coming to you, that they have that issue with the files.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of people think 3D printing is new technology. It should all be automated, but it's kind of like the first wave came about and nobody thought about actually how to convert those files, and it does take a lot of manual effort because they were never made to be 3D printed, and you're scaling everything down, so it means that loads of issues arise from doing that.
So it's a holistic view of the 3D printing services that Fixie 3D give.
Yeah, exactly. So right from the moment or at any stage in your design, you could be sketching your design in 3D and you can send it to us to get a prototype of that stage of the design.
Brilliant.
And in relation to Nimbus, what was the initial problem that you had, and what brought you to the technology gateway?
We were quite early on in the concept of what we wanted to, or how we wanted to communicate the automation of our services, and we had an idea, I guess, about a 3D viewer, a web-based 3D viewer that would allow the architect to provide us all with all the information we needed to produce a model for them, but also at the same time their experience and cut out a lot of the back and forth email communications, to put the control back into the hands of the architect, essentially. So we don't have the kind of UX skill set in-house at Fixie, so we came to Nimbus looking for that support to help us flesh out our ideas and get some kind of tangible results from it to take forward into the software development pathway and to build on with further UI development.
Can we ask how you came across Nimbus? Like, what drew you to us out of all the other technology gateways?
Yes, so I was within Ireland, different research organisations with connection to 3D printing. That's really how I came across Nimbus. And then we had a few early stage chats, and as I said, we're very early on in the stage of this part of our development, and the guys really helped me understand the landscape, the funding landscape, the kind of different options, routes forward. And I would say that they introduced me to things like New Frontiers as well, which we eventually got onto and are on at the moment, the second phase. So it's all been kind of knitted quite well into our journey as well. So it's been great.
Brilliant. And I know the approach Kevin has mentioned before, it's very collaborative between Nimbus and our clients. Kevin, I don't know if you want to, or Denise, answer that, and the process, how it was very collaborative between Fixie 3D and Nimbus.
As you know, Nimbus took a very kind of co-creation kind of approach when it comes to kind of user research and design. I suppose the very first thing, when we met Ronan and had the chat, was kind of to understand where his business was, like what were his actual priorities in terms of like the critical path. So we understood very early on that like there was a huge opportunity, I suppose, to add more value proposition around, I suppose, supporting certain things that a user wants when it comes to 3D printing. One, the biggest, design collaboration, which we can all kind of understand as designers. The second thing is communication. So when you are 3D printing a file, a complex file in the case of architectural models, that communication has to be very clear and has to be mediated. And there's opportunity through the tools that we have to kind of enhance that. The other thing was just the project management, things around tracking. So just having Ronan kind of actively partaking in the kind of design process was a huge win for us. So obviously when we met Ronan pre-COVID, and the intention was for Ronan to visit us down in Cork and come into our new fancy design thinking labs range of I won't sell it too much. So we had to, I suppose, we're all being resilient right now and looking at kind of what's out there to kind of, like right now having this Teams call, and we had to make that transition really quickly to find out what tools are out there to kind of support the collaboration that's at the kind of the top of our ethos of how we work and how we work co-creatively. So it's kind of a buy-in from all of us. So we started using Miro. So Miro has been, I suppose, a savior to us and many around the world. So Miro is a kind of an online collaboration tool for distributed teams working remotely right now. It has all, in my opinion, the bells and whistles to support UX, research, design, strategy, workshopping, even business development tools. So that's kind of worked really well for us. So we'll probably go through that in a moment. Yeah,
perfect, brilliant. And lastly, Ronan, what has the impact been for Fixie 3D since you've started working with Nimbus?
I'd say one big aspect has been able to communicate internally what the idea is moving forward. We've talked about it a lot, and probably all the co-founders had different ideas of it, but coming out of the end of the process with wireframes and even just fleshing out the user journey map was really helpful for us. It got everybody excited about the next steps, and it's just having that something tangible after a lot of talking is very useful.
So I suppose we'll just go into there a bit about the UX UI team. So yourself, Kevin, and Denise, if you'd like to just tell us about Nimbus, the UX UI RNS service offerings.
Do you want to take this one, Denise, or?
No, sure. You start, and I, as you go.
So and Nimbus, as we were saying, in relation to Ronan's project, like we take a very kind of tailored approach. Firstly, where we understand like the needs of our client and their business. So everything, once we understand that, firstly, we kind of, I suppose, create kind of a strategy, a user experience research design strategy for that. So the kind of the range of, I suppose, services that we offer across our UX, UI research and design service range from user research, design and analysis, We do a lot of ideation, co-ideation activities and preliminary design activities, to prototyping, rapid prototyping. So kind of creating prototypes, low fidelity, really quick and early, so our clients can kind of get that feedback that they need to ensure that they're not creating the wrong thing for the wrong person. We do a lot of obviously digital UI design. So we work a lot with best practice in UI design and use the latest tools. At the moment, we're kind of really good, strong advocates of Figma, for example, has worked really well for us. And then we work closely with our software dev team. So we hand over, I suppose, the outputs from our workshops, our user interface design, whether it's wireframes, design specification document, where we also do a lot of testing, so different types of testing. This could range from just an observational study, looking at a user interacting with an application, to a heuristic evaluation. That would be us as UX or UI experts evaluating the usability of an interface against design principles. So we offer such a broad range of UX services, but again, going back to the point that it's very much dependent what our client needs. So for example, we would work with a lot of SMEs who may have a very kind of rough idea, but a lot of the time maybe that idea hasn't been, I suppose, validated from like their audience or their customer or end user. So we'd help them do that. We'd kind of show them how they can really get that kind of insight from their end user through using the tools, such as interviewing, observational studies, where we bring them through a kind of a pathway through kind of hands-on workshops, as we used to do, but now online, where they participate in kind of ideation activities that allows them to kind of translate their idea very clearly, whether it's to user stories, to journey mapping, to mocking up applications representative of their idea. So it allows them to kind of really quickly get, I suppose, the feedback that they need, whether it's for just their end user, but most importantly, whether they're applying for other phases of funding. So they would use a lot of the key deliverables in their, I suppose, their slide decks, or when they're out. It's very, I suppose, end-to-end process, really.
Excellent. And I suppose it's handy when there's clients such as Ronan that kind of know the idea of prototyping and design, but just in case there were other clients maybe that don't have a background in anything to do with UX UI design, yourself and Denise are obviously very capable of taking them through the process in a simplified way as well.
Definitely. And what we find a lot is, very early on, our clients are very proactive, once they get onboarded, and, they're very open to participating, is they actually learn themselves. They learn about design, the value of design, they learn about design thinking, they learn about the importance of empathy, just understanding your end user in the first instance. So they really buy into it, and, as they go, they kind of upskill themselves. We've worked with clients in the past, who've kind of either went on to kind of even take on a role of learning about, UX design, maybe taking a course, where some of the larger companies would have created a kind of a division in their company just dedicated for UX design. So they definitely see the value of it, but they see the value of it because they're proactively involved. They buy into it very early, and they give up their time, which is very valuable for any SME, really.
Yeah. Excellent. And I suppose, Denise, Kevin just touched a little bit on how, so no one was expecting COVID and projects obviously started pre-COVID, but could you just talk a little bit about how you guys have been working with clients and colleagues since the pandemic?
So yeah, like Kevin said, we had a new lab recently built within Nimbus, which unfortunately sits a bit idle now at the moment until we get back into it. And we really took our whole workshop process and learnt kind of as we did it from the get-go, kind of just hit the road running and try to translate everything we did into an online process. So we did use a couple of collaborative tools beforehand, like Figma, which we could have all worked together on, whether we were in the building together or remotely. And then we started using Miro as well, which is a really, really good collaborative tool, which really works really well visually creating things. And really laying out all our workshopping process. And I think one of the really important things about the work that we do, that it is really collaborative. and we really get our clients to work with us and work through the process. So having these online tools that we can in real time work on together, and see the process, everything's laid out there and you can see it from basically start to finish as you go through, is just really valuable, I think, both for us in as the UX team, learning and adapting as we do, and then also for clients, because they can come back to it and they can refer to it, and you kind of really capture conversations that end at the start of a project and they're still there at the end of a project. So it's been really good.
Brilliant. And I suppose this is kind of a question both for the UX UI team in Nimbus, but also a little bit for Ronan about the value of UX research and design. So I don't know if you kind of, Ronan, from your side of things with Fixie 3D, the value of having that research and design for your company. I know you touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, and then I'll go to Kevin and then back to Denise.
Yeah, definitely, because I guess as founders, you have an idea of what you think is the right solution, and testing that out is the most important thing you can do at an early stage. And then we obviously got the results, the kind of tangible results, as I said, at the end of it, but it's improved our understanding to how we can communicate our idea in different ways to, as Kevin was saying, we've taken it on for different funding applications, and we're able to, not even through the outputs of the workshops, but how we understand it, we're able to present different graphics, different concepts to our funders and other people to communicate it. So that's been really useful, and that's helped us secure other funding as well.
Brilliant. And Kevin, for yourself, what is the value? Obviously, it's your job, but what's the value to you of research and design?
I 100% agree with Ronan there. I think I suppose the most valuable things with UX design is basically to validate, for any business, basically validating ideas really early, just ensuring that you're kind of solving the right problem for the right audience. So that's really critical. Why it's critical? Because I suppose any early startup, they want to be lean, they don't want to, I suppose, invest too much money in the wrong thing. So reducing development cost is really important. So developing the wrong thing, I suppose. Just really ensuring we're all humans, we're going to kind of experience products, and so it's really the customer satisfaction, ensuring that's kind of really key, that the user is at the center of all of this. So on getting them kind of really to kind of either partake in it, and kind of being very close to them through our empathy work, through observation, interviewing, and just kind of even immersing yourself into their kind of lives to get a kind of a closer understanding. So it's proven that companies who focus on UX, the big design companies out there like Apple and Google, IBM now with their design thinking, is UX basically, it has a financial impact for the company in terms of their kind of, I suppose, key differentiator of being innovative. So all these innovative companies, UX design is at the center. It's the most, I suppose, critical component to their innovation mix.
Brilliant. And Denise, is there anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think obviously I'd be a UX evangelist, and so I'm lead with the user. That's who you're always designing something for someone to use. So if you don't consider that person, who are you designing for? And I think that we get a variety of clients at different stages of their journeys into us in Nimbus, and at any stage of your product we can dig in and do a UX methodology to improve if you have something already, or if you are at that early stage. And I think that's just the one thing that I find really interesting, is because obviously we're dealing with this, they're an expert in their idea, and it's how can we then take their idea and translate it into what the user needs as well, and that sometimes they don't always gel, and it's kind of finding a way to navigate that process, that or that surprising things that a user might need that you've never thought about. And I think that's the really interesting thing about UX work, is that when you dig down into it and when you get into empathizing with your target users, you really discover a lot of interesting things about like needs that you've never considered, or that you've overthought an area completely, or in the worst case scenario that nobody actually wants this product and that it's a nice idea but not necessarily a good idea. And I think that, like Kevin said, like it's been shown that UX reduces cost all the way through a product life cycle. And I think it's really, like, it's a really nice piece of work to do to validate products. And it's really interesting as well, I think, from a client side, just to see that process of understanding who they are designing for or who they're developing for, and really coming away with like, yeah, I have a really concrete understanding of what we're doing. And then I hope, and I'm sure Kevin's the same, that they take this beyond, if they're no longer working with us, that there's like a little UX person in their head now. They're kind of thinking, you know, what would the user want? And that then you're kind of impacting as they go and make choices in the future. So
yeah, I would say that it's a really enjoyable process as well from the client side. Not only because you're like fleshing out your own idea and making it become more real, but you're uncovering all those things as well, new ideas that you can build on top of. And I thought going into it, like from an architecture background, that you understand design thinking, but there's so much you can learn, especially in the digital space as well. We're so used to using digital products, have your own understanding and likes and dislikes as well. So it all kind of helps you, brings you along, and I find it really enjoyable.
So yeah, this is I suppose our first workshop with Ronan. This is a layout of a Miro board. So it's basically Miro is an infinite kind of canvas with a wide variety of tools, both design tools, collaboration tools, communication tools. So you could have distributed teams working remotely, accessing Miro at the same time. So we would use Miro for our kind of work together with Ronan. So this would have been kind of like, say, an example of our first workshop, where our first workshop would have been just understanding, obviously, the goals and the scope of the project. However, stakeholder interview, discussion, etc. But to understand, as I said already, kind of the business needs and value proposition, where we would have just understood the kind of the current landscape of the business and customer needs. So we'd have done kind of a series of kind of group activities in Miro. So a good example we would typically, you know, when we meet the client, maybe the first time, we would have kind of understand like their business, who they are, and kind of the value. So we would have do a kind of traditional kind of interview, as we would have done with kind of Ronan. But we tried to look at more kind of tools that are a bit more kind of interactive, more engaging. So a popular tool right now, and I suppose in a way people have been using, is called the Lean UX Canvas from a UX consultant called Jeff Godelf. So it's a good tool in a way because it just do a kind of a process of 8 sections, which kind of bring up the speed very quickly in relation to understanding, you know, the business landscape, the user needs. But also allows you to create a kind of a hypothesis of what you should be doing to kind of validate the research that we should be doing. So it's basically kind of a bootstrapping tool. So very early on, we would have kind of, I suppose, worked together on these kind of activities. So we'd be able to kind of, you know, it has kind of Post-it notes, probably the most popular kind of tool for UX designer, Post-its. So you can just really quickly kind of add Post-its as you like onto the board. So task 1, you know, as you go, so you could, you know, really quickly add tasks as you go. So it's really just very, very simple, quick, intuitive tool. So we would have used Miro for that kind of workflow. We would have also maybe shared with Ronan the business model canvas, again, just to understand the business model. So we also have our kind of personal workspaces in Miro, so it allows us to kind of track notes as you go, and it kind of saves everything automatically. So it's a great tool there to automatically append. At the end of every workshop, we kind of have a retrospect, you know, understanding kind of what worked well for us and maybe our next steps. So it's a great kind of tool for documenting everything that you're kind of doing. Then just an example then of other workshops you would have done where we moved towards more concentrated on, once we had the kind of the business, the vision, the goals, etc., the strategy understood amongst ourselves, we were able to do more kind of user research activities and ideation activities such as personas and customer journey mapping. So an example there would have been, the customer journey mapping tool, which is probably one of the most important kind of tools that we would have kind of used, or activities. So basically it's almost like a blueprint that describes all your different users, how they interact with the service or the product chronologically. So it's almost like a kind of an ideation tool, but a prototyping tool at the same time. So it's very, very detailed. As you see here, we map out the kind of the sequential actions that a user takes when they access maybe Fixie 3D for the first time. You look at the different phases, the onboarding, the account profile, project management. So it allows us to kind of have this kind of, I suppose, critique between us, or evaluation, and be able to kind of work it out as we go to come to kind of like kind of conclusion of how we envisage the product or the service to kind of function or work. But at the same time, it kind of opens up key opportunities for innovation as well. So it's not only about the interactivity, we also try to get a kind of a grip on what the user would be thinking as they interact along the way or through the product or service. So it kind of has a lot of detail in it. Obviously personas as well. Prior to that, we would have done work developing out our personas. So personas are representative of your end user. So typically you do kind of ethnographic research, go out, interview, observe maybe many architects, and you bring this insight, and you probably try to create a representation of them through personas. So we would have done a lot of that work as well. So all of this really contributed to the development of wireframes that were representative of the software service, and mock-up user interfaces. So these are just kind of examples. Would you like to add anything to that, Ronan or Denise?
Yeah. I found this really useful because, again, we hadn't, I guess, put a lot of this down on paper and understood the motivations of all our different client segments and each step of their journey. It's so important because you uncover tiny pain points and opportunities to add value to the customer. So it's really important. It is time consuming, but the value you get out of it, and the fact you go back to this and build on it in the future as well as things change for us or for the client, it's invaluable.
Yeah, I think for me, using Miro, I think that's been one of the most valuable things as well, is to be able to see everything as we've laid it out, and that you can go back to things and you can add notes and you can add comments. That's been really helpful, I think, for me, even just in the process that we take in our in-person workshops. This is such a nice tool, because I was even thinking about this, that a lot of times when a workshop's done, everything eventually comes down from the wall because a new workshop will take place, while Miro allows you for it always to be on the wall and always to be accessible. And it's great. It's definitely a tool that one day, if we ever get back into an office, that it's still going to stay at the core, I think, of the process that we use from now on.
So yeah, it was fantastic really just to have Ronan, who is very kind of detailed, very comprehensive, give us kind of insight into kind of the current kind of what we call the current flow, the current experience. So we were able to kind of basically find out kind of opportunities for enhancing that, and the customer journey map was a great tool. Not only that, was useful always for ourselves when we're getting into kind of the work then around creating user interfaces, mocking up the applications through, to represent the ideas or the value add as such. So we're able to kind of basically go through, I suppose, the customer journey map and kind of highlight the key screens or the applications that could be mocked up. are designed as such. So it allows you to create kind of almost like a content inventory of what you need to kind of design. So we would have then kind of started working in Figma. So I have Figma up in there. Figma is a very popular user interface prototyping tool. So in relation to the work that we would have done, we would have highlighted kind of key kind of features that we kind of wanted to express or showcase in the application. A lot of that was orientated around, I suppose, an architect's kind of need to kind of showcase their work that they've been working on. So we had this kind of idea of a kind of a community where architects could basically upload kind of like their products and have them kind of showcased on the platform to other architects. So that would be kind of to earn or garner this kind of need of around, keeping them retained, getting kind of that gratification, that feedback as you go. The other thing about the application, it's in terms of the design and look and feel, what you see now is very low fidelity kind of wireframes, but it was kind of maximize as much of the user interface that we could. So we would have looked at a lot of kind of content, entertainment websites, let's say, that would kind of showcase kind of content maximizing most of the user interface. So that's kind of the look and feel that we went for, just in terms of information architecture and this kind of recommender engine. So everything that's in priority or in the moment would be kind of more in the hierarchy. So as you see here, you can see the latest project that an architect might be working on. So it's kind of to facilitate the kind of communication, design workflow between an architect and maybe the Fixie. So the fixers, they're the 3D modelers or fix the files in Fixie 3D. So here you could have like an example of a product, and the North Kent Road, for example, where they've so we'll just go through it here. You'd have the user's profile of their kind of key projects. They're showcasing their work. So once they upload a model, for example, that they'd like to submit to Fixie, whether it's to work on file fixing or else the 3D printing, they can quickly select new project, add a project name, give it a description, and upload the 3D file. So you see there, once it's loaded, we've basically laid out the user interface again to maximize most of the UI, where they go through a process, a very few steps in terms of selecting the scale, the material type, size, deadline, etc. for that model. So we'll just click through it. As you see, as they're adding or appending to it, the kind of the costing and the scheduling or the deadlines can be dynamically updated. What's really cool about kind of the whole ideation process, what came out of it was this need for kind of, I suppose, communication, being able to track what you're doing, and this kind of team experience. So you see here that if I'm an architect and I'm working with my team, I can basically add tags or pins to the model. So you can basically track and communicate. So this kind of collaboration kind of approach, and this kind of social kind of approach that we take also. So the tools basically track and showcase where you are, what you've completed. So it's very kind of transparent, very collaborative. So we basically got so far as in creating a lot of just mock-ups or wireframes representative of kind of the workflow. The next phase would be kind of for Ronan and the team to basically, put this out into the world and get feedback from architects, to kind of continuously iterate and improve it. So that's kind of the ideology around kind of design thinking. It's kind of rapid, I suppose, rapid design and prototyping and kind of feedback. So how it could look then, just very quickly, if we apply kind of Fixie's design scheme, color scheme and layout in the future, you could have, we could go on to the next phase, which would be the UI design. So it's always kind of taking it that step further once you get feedback. So that's kind of where we got to in relation to the prototype.
Fantastic. From an outsider's point of view, this is excellent actually to be able to visualize how the process of getting the voucher, coming into Nimbus, having the discussion, again, like you said, Kevin, the empathy of it, and then seeing it go from UX to potentially into UI. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
And it was all over the space of not so many sessions, I suppose, 5 or 6 sessions in total.
About 6 sessions in total, yeah. So we basically had a structure kind of well formulated beforehand, you know, so we kind of had our plan as such, and we stuck to our plan. And I mean, the thing with working online was like, Ronan was, you know, he's a design background, he appreciated that to kind of asynchronously participate in the process. So he was able to upload, you know, documentation to us. He was able to log into Miro, into Figma, and provide commentary, you know, which he did very, very actively, and we were able to kind of respond to that as well. So, you know, what you get from this, you know, if you're working together, is really going back to the idea that it is very co-creative process. You know, the more you put in, the more you're going to get. You know, so Nimbus is very much, you know, strong advocate of, you know, the whole thing being very collaborative, you know, in terms of its approach, you know. So I'd say a last question for Ronan is, you know, what's the next steps for Fixie in relation to bringing, I suppose, more on the software services forward, you know?
Exactly. It's where there's another company that is using the wireframes to mock up and test with some existing software services, whether we can basically an MVP or a proof of concept of it, if we take that direction. So that immediately is something we can take to investors and like show them how this might work in reality. And then just, it's the starting point. Even at the end of our workshops, we were like, oh well, we can move on and do this in the next stage, and I'm still thinking about those things, and we'll have chats with you about those later. Yeah.